You're still doing manual fabric audits? Fascinating. That means you're voluntarily spending weekends cross-checking Power BI datasets, fabric workspaces, and Purview classifications with spreadsheets. Admirable, if your goal is to win an award for least efficient use of human intelligence. Governance in Microsoft Fabric isn't difficult because the features are missing. It's difficult because the systems refuse to speak the same language. Each operates like a self-important manager who insists their department is different. Purview tracks classifications, Power BI enforces security, Fabric handles pipelines, and you get to referee their arguments in Excel. Enter GPT-5 inside Microsoft 365 Copilot. This isn't the same obedient assistant you ask to summarize notes. It's an auditor with reasoning. The difference? GPT-5 doesn't just find information, it understands relationships. In this video, you'll learn how it automates Fabric governance across services without a single manual verification. Chain of thought reasoning coming up turns compliance drudgery into pure logic. Why governance breaks in Microsoft Fabric. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Fabric unified analytics but forgot to unify governance. Underneath the glossy dashboards lies a messy network of systems competing for attention. Fabric stores the data, Power BI visualizes it, and Purview categorizes it, but none of them talk fluently. You'd think Microsoft built them to cooperate. In practice, it's more like three geniuses at a conference table, each speaking their own dialect of JSON. That's why governance collapses under its own ambition. You've got a lake house full of sensitive data, Power BI dashboards referencing it from 15 angles, and Purview assigning labels in splendid isolation. When auditors ask for proof that every classified data set is secured, you discover that Fabric knows lineage, Purview knows tags, and Power BI knows roles. But no one knows the whole story. The result is digital spaghetti, an endless bowl of interconnected fields, permissions, and flows. Every strand touches another, yet none of them recognize the connection. Governance officers end up manually pulling API exports, cross-referencing names that almost but not quite match, and arguing with CSVs that refuse to align. The average audit becomes a sociology experiment on human patience. Take Helena from compliance. She once spent 2 weeks reconciling Purview's highly confidential datasets with Power BI restrictions. 2 weeks to learn that half the assets were misclassified and the other half mislabeled because someone renamed a workspace mid-project. Her verdict? If Fabric had a conscience, it would apologize. But Fabric doesn't. It just logs events and smiles. The real problem isn't technical, it's logical. The platforms are brilliant at storing facts but hopeless at reasoning about them. They can tell you what exists but not how those things relate in context. That's why your scripts and queries only go so far. To validate compliance across systems, you need an entity capable of inference, something that doesn't just see data but deduces relationships between them. Enter GPT-5, the first intern in Microsoft history who doesn't need constant supervision. Unlike previous Copilot models, it doesn't stop at keyword matching. It performs structured reasoning, correlating Fabric's lineage graphs, Purview's classifications, and Power BI's security models into a unified narrative. It builds what the tools themselves can't: context. Governance finally moves from endless inspection to intelligent automation, and for once you can audit the system instead of diagnosing its misunderstandings. Enter GPT-5. Reasoning as the missing link. Let's be clear. GPT-5 didn't simply wake up one morning and learn to type faster. The headlines may talk about speed, but that's a side effect. The real headline is reasoning. Microsoft built chain of thought logic directly into Copilot's operating brain. Translation: the model doesn't just regurgitate documentation, it simulates how a human expert would think, minus the coffee addiction and annual leave. Compare that to GPT-4. The earlier model was like a diligent assistant who answered questions exactly as phrased. Ask it about Purview policies, and it would obediently stay inside that sandbox. Intelligent, yes. Autonomous, no. It couldn't infer that your question about dataset access might also require cross-checking Power BI roles and Fabric pipelines. You had to spoon-feed context. GPT-5, on the other hand, teaches itself context as it goes. It notices the connections you forgot to mention and reasons through them before responding. Here's what that looks like inside Microsoft 365 Copilot. The moment you submit a governance query, say, show me all Fabric assets containing customer addresses that aren't classified in Purview, GPT-5 triggers an internal reasoning chain. Step 1, interpret your intent. It recognizes the request isn't about a single system, it's about all three surfaces of your data estate. Step 2, it launches separate mental threads, one per domain. Fabric provides data lineage, Purview contributes classification metadata, and Power BI exposes security configuration. Step 3, it converges those threads, reconciling identifiers and cross-checking semantics, so the final answer is verified rather than approximated. Old Copilot stitched information, new Copilot validates logic. That's why simple speed comparisons miss the point. The groundbreaking part isn't how fast it replies. It's that every reply has internal reasoning baked in. It's as if Power Automate went to law school, finished summa cum laude, and came back determined to enforce compliance clauses. Most users mistake reasoning for verbosity. They assume a longer explanation means the model's showing off. No, the verbosity is evidence of deliberation. It's documenting its cognitive audit trail. Just as an auditor writes notes supporting each conclusion, GPT-5 outlines the logical steps it followed. That audit trail is not fluff, it's protection. When regulators ask how a conclusion was reached, you finally have an answer that extends beyond Copilot said so. Let's dissect the functional model. Think of it as a three-stage pipeline: request interpretation, multi-domain reasoning, verified synthesis. In the first stage, Copilot passes language in context, understanding that unlabeled sensitive data implies a Purview classification gap. In the second stage, it reasons across data planes simultaneously, correlating fields that aren't identical but are functionally related, like matching customer ID in Fabric with Cust ID in Power BI. In the final synthesis stage, it cross-verifies every inferred link before presenting the summary you trust. And here's the shocker: you never asked it to do any of that. The reasoning loop runs invisibly, like a miniature internal committee that debates the evidence before letting the spokesperson talk. And that's what Microsoft means by embedded chain of thought. GPT-5 chooses when deeper reasoning is required and deploys it automatically. So when you ask a seemingly innocent compliance question, which lakehouse tables contain PII but lack a corresponding Power BI RLS rule? GPT-5 doesn't resort to keyword lookup. It reconstructs the lineage graph, cross-references Purview tags, interprets security bindings, and surfaces only those mismatches verifiable across all datasets. The result isn't a guess, it's a derived conclusion. And yes, this finally solves the governance problem that Fabric itself could never articulate. For the first time, contextual correctness replaces manual correlation. You spend less time gathering fragments and more time interpreting strategy. The model performs relational thinking on your behalf, like delegating analysis to someone who not only reads the policy but also understands the politics behind it. So, how different does your day look? Imagine an intern who predicts which policy objects overlap before you even draft the query, explains its reasoning line by line, and doesn't bother you unless the dataset genuinely conflicts. That's GPT-5 inside Copilot, the intern promoted to compliance officer, running silent, always reasoning. Now, let's put it to work in an actual audit. The old way versus the GPT-5 way. Let's walk through a real scenario. Your task: confirm every dataset in a Fabric lakehouse containing personally identifiable information is classified in Purview and protected by row-level security in Power BI. Straightforward objective, catastrophic execution. The old workflow resembled a scavenger hunt designed by masochists. You opened Power BI to export access roles, jumped into Purview to list labeled assets, then exported Fabric pipeline metadata hoping column names matched. They rarely did. 3 dashboards, 4 exports, 2 migraines, and still no certainty. You were reconciling data that lived in parallel universes. Old Copilot didn't help much. It could summarize inside each service, but it lacked the intellectual glue to connect them. Ask it, list Purview classified datasets used in Power BI, and it politely retrieved lists separately. It was like hiring 3 translators who each know only one language. Yes, they speak fluently, but never to each other. The audit ended with you praying the names aligned by coincidence. Spoiler, they didn't. Now enter GPT-5. Same query, completely different brain mechanics. You say, audit all Fabric assets with PII to confirm classification and security restrictions. Copilot, powered by GPT-5, interprets the statement holistically. Step 1. It queries Fabric's internal lineage graph, tracing every artifact that references customer data. It doesn't stop at storage containers. It follows transformations through notebooks and pipelines. Step 2. It fetches Purview classification tables, verifying whether those artifacts carry sensitive data labels. Step 3. It dives into Power BI, cross-checking row-level security mappings against the same lineage identifiers Fabric exposed. Step 4. It merges that knowledge into a single compliance summary, complete with unresolved inconsistencies flagged as risks. At no point did you explicitly mention correlate IDs or join on dataset name. The reasoning layer deduced that itself. Because GPT-5 structures logic internally, it identifies relationships that human auditors would otherwise confirm manually. This isn't pattern matching, it's inference at enterprise scale. For insight, let's lay the reasoning sequence bare. Identify, match, cross-check, synthesize. First, identify the lineage, what comes from where. Second, match datasets to Purview labels. Third, cross-check Power BI restrictions for those same datasets. Finally, synthesize all of it into a verified governance report. The entire cycle executes with one query, replacing hours of manual triage. What makes this powerful isn't magic, it's consistency. Human auditors are fallible. They forget a data flow name, overlook a reclassified table, lose patience. GPT-5 doesn't. It treats every record as part of a logical chain, tracing relationships until confidence thresholds are met. In practice, that means Fabric governance stops being a guessing game and starts being algebra. The model reduces compliance to a solvable equation. Let's add a dash of human disbelief. During closed review, an IT lead ran a cross-service audit expecting GPT-5 to choke on inconsistent identifiers. Instead, the model inferred the mappings correctly, recognizing that cust ID in Power BI referred to the same field as customer key in Fabric. The lead stared at the result as though it had read his mind. Strictly speaking, it read the metadata better than he ever did. That's the aha moment. Identical prompt complexity, exponentially smarter reasoning. You didn't become a better auditor overnight. The system did. And suddenly tasks that once required scripts, exports, and weekend hours reduced to conversational prompts. Ask, wait, review. The reasoning handles the correlation. Notice something subtle. Copilot now delivers explanations, not just answers. Its report includes rationale for each conclusion. Lineage, trace paths, classification sources, applied RLS policies. That transparency transforms audits from reactive documentation into living evidence. You can show management why a dataset fails compliance without rereading 3 exports. The AI has already proven its logic. Economically, this is transformative. The cost of a manual audit isn't just labor, it's opportunity. Every hour spent reconciling CSVs is an hour not spent improving architecture. GPT-5 changes that balance. You reclaim time, reduce errors, and establish repeatable compliance patterns across tenants. The shift is measurable. Governance moves from episodic panic to continuous assurance. And philosophically, something deeper occurs. Fabric used to feel opaque, a grand machine with too many secret compartments. With GPT-5 watching, the compartments illuminate. The lines between Purview, Power BI, and Fabric blur into one connected schema overseen by an ever-reasoning intelligence. You're no longer crawling through logs, you're managing systemic accountability. So yes, the clipboard generation of spreadsheet auditors can finally rest. GPT-5 in Copilot has internalized their methods, refined their mess, and automated their intent. Visibility isn't the problem anymore, verification is instantaneous. And now that logic itself is handled, we can talk about the next effect, what this automation does to your budget, your compliance posture, and your sanity. The business impact from reactive to predictive compliance. Let's quantify this rationally before anyone starts celebrating productivity miracles. Manual audits aren't just slow, they're financially extravagant forms of self-harm. Every quarterly review requires human analysts pulling metadata, aligning exports, verifying classifications, and justifying discrepancies, activities that generate zero competitive advantage. You're essentially paying experts to babysit logs. Multiply that across business units, and governance ceases to be a control function. It becomes a hidden tax. Now observe what happens the moment reasoning automation enters. GPT-5 doesn't simply speed up individual checks, it redefines the temporal nature of compliance. Before, static snapshots scheduled every fiscal cycle, each decaying in accuracy the moment a pipeline changes. After, continuous assurance sustained by automated correlation. The old pattern looked for errors after they occurred. The new one anticipates them before they metastasize. Consider predictive auditing. Because GPT-5 understands relationships, it recognizes when data drift is creeping in. Say someone modifies a Fabric notebook feeding customer data tables. The model instantly infers that Purview's classification scope might no longer match, prompting a caution before the lapse appears in a report. It's like an immune system built into Copilot, detecting infection before symptoms. In governance terms, that's evolution. The operational math is equally impressive. Audit cycles that took days now resolve in minutes. The model performs correlational reasoning across platforms faster than conventional scripts can authenticate connections. That's not hyperbole, it's computational reality. Reasoning allows Copilot to run concurrent validations, collapsing sequential workflows into parallelized logic. The result? Time regained, frustration annulled, compliance accuracy maintained at scale. Confidence expands alongside speed. Old audits depended on incomplete joins and manual inference. Good guesses wrapped in formal reports. GPT-5 replaces estimation with cross-verification. When it declares a dataset compliant, it's because lineage, classification, and security policies align under observable logic, not assumption. Managers stop signing reports they secretly doubt. Executives regain trust in their dashboards. The organization transitions from "we think we are compliant" to "we can prove it programmatically." Scalability is the quiet triumph. Before, governance scaled linearly with staff. Every new workspace demanded proportional labor. With Copilot reasoning, scale becomes logarithmic. One reasoning model can supervise thousands of assets simultaneously, learning systemic patterns rather than repeating manual steps. When new tenants spawn, they inherit pre-validated governance structures instead of bespoke chaos. And yes, GPT-5 has a memory sharper than your compliance team's shared spreadsheet. It not only tracks unclassified files, it remembers why they were missed. That context transforms remediation from cleanup to prevention. Next cycle, the model self-checks those weak points first, which means your forgotten CSVs, the ones tucked into random data flow folders, are finally exposed before they embarrass you in an audit meeting. Progress sometimes feels like surveillance, and in this case, that's the point. Economically, the implications ripple outward. Reduced audit time translates to reclaimed engineering hours, fewer regulatory penalties, and lower reputational risk. Governance funding shifts from crisis mitigation to capability development. Instead of hiring contractors to patch spreadsheets, teams invest in refining prompts and connectors that improve the reasoning engine itself. You stop working for compliance and start making compliance work for you. The cultural shift is subtler but profound. In traditional IT, compliance was synonymous with drudgery, a chore appended to innovation. GPT-5 in Copilot reframes it as a continuous design principle. Governance becomes ambient. Audits no longer interrupt projects, they accompany them like background compilation. Designers perceive security not as bureaucracy but as hygiene, always present, seldom obstructive. Let's be appropriately sardonic. The same managers who once ignored governance dashboards now quote them in presentations. Why? Because predictive intelligence makes results look impressive. When Copilot forecasts risk exposure before auditors request reports, leadership calls it strategic foresight. Translation, they finally see value in not being blindsided. So yes, GPT-5 doesn't just automate documentation, it upgrades organizational awareness, it turns compliance from a forensic exercise into preventive medicine. The system inoculates itself against procedural decay, and you, the once sleep-deprived auditor, become the diagnostician operating at the speed of thought. The only lingering complaint, hardly anyone misses the spreadsheets. Implementing GPT-5 workflow in Copilot Studio. Now, let's get tactical. The part where theory meets configuration. Setting up GPT-5's reasoning workflow in Copilot Studio isn't witchcraft. It's just structured plumbing. But like any plumbing, one wrong connector and the logic leaks everywhere. So let's connect the pipes properly. Step 1. Enable GPT-5 reasoning inside Copilot Studio. Don't assume it's active. Microsoft treats this like a safety feature, not a default. In your Copilot Studio environment, open the model selection menu, find the GPT-5 reasoning model, and explicitly set it as default for your custom Copilots. This flag controls access to chain of thought operations, the mechanism enabling Copilot to reason across Fabric, PowerBI, and Purview simultaneously instead of sequentially. Without it, you're just talking to yesterday's model and wondering why it forgets context faster than your intern after lunch. Step 2. Configure connectors. Logic requires visibility, and reasoning can't infer what it can't see. Ensure Fabric, Power BI, and Purview APIs are linked through official connectors. Each connector authenticates with Microsoft Entra ID and exposes metadata endpoints, datasets, classifiers, security roles. The beauty of Copilot Studio is that these connectors speak the platform dialects for you. Fabric outputs lineage maps, Power BI exposes dataset bindings, and Purview lists sensitivity labels. Together, they form the tri-data ecosystem GPT-5 needs to think coherently. Step 3. Set up prompt templates for recurring audits. You'll create reusable command skeletons like audit all Fabric assets containing data type to confirm alignment with Purview labels and RLS rules. Variables inject context, while the model's reasoning engine performs inquiry. Unlike rigid workflows in Power Automate, these prompts behave dynamically. GPT-5 adapts reasoning depth to query complexity. A trivial check on one workspace runs lightweight reasoning, while an enterprise-wide audit triggers full multi-layer inference. Step 4. Test reasoning depth using staged anomalies. Artificial errors aren't just for QA, they're logic drills. Introduce a misclassified dataset in a Fabric lakehouse, remove its Purview label, and grant open Power BI access. Then run your Copilot audit. The output should highlight unmatched classification, missing RLS, and lineage conflict. If it doesn't, your reasoning configuration lacks visibility or connectors are misscoped. Think of this as calibrating the AI's moral compass. It can't enforce ethical governance if it's blind. Step 5. Review and iterate inside Fabric's governance dashboard. GPT-5 generates results as both narrative and schema. Exportable JSON summaries include source identifiers, risk probabilities, and recommended remediations. Feed them into Fabric's audit workspace where you can sort findings by severity. Over time, these sessions create a library of reasoning templates tuned to your dataset naming conventions, your compliance regimes, your particular brand of corporate chaos. Here's the conceptual shortcut. Power Query meets AI. In the past, Power Query let you transform data declaratively. Logic written once, applied endlessly. Copilot with GPT-5 reasoning performs introspection the same way. Reasoning paths written once, applied continuously. You're not building flows, you're defining how intelligence self-validates. Now, a wry note of caution. Automation without skepticism turns you into a spectator of your own system. While GPT-5's deductions are astonishingly accurate, Blind trust invites complacency. Always validate output using Fabric's native lineage viewer or Purview insights. Think of it as running double-entry bookkeeping for machine logic. You're confirming that the AI's new gospel still aligns with canonical truth. When discrepancies appear, adjust context injection. Fine-tune which metadata sources it prioritizes. A brief best practice intermission. First, keep prompts specific yet generalizable. Avoid directives like check table customer data 123 and favor patterns like check all customer-related tables. GPT-5 thrives on relational inference. It needs scope, not specificity. Second, establish validation checkpoints. Schedule Copilot to perform reasoning runs after significant schema changes or pipeline deployments. It's easier than post-incident scrambles. Third, monitor model versioning. Future updates may tweak reasoning heuristics. Consistency demands documentation. One final microstory to ground this. A mid-sized financial team tested this exact workflow. A 2-person compliance crew maintaining 8 Fabric lakehouses. Before, audit cycles consumed 3 weeks. After implementing GPT-5 reasoning, one continuous Copilot session generated cross-platform validation overnight. The next morning, they weren't reconciling spreadsheets, they were approving automation reports. Their compliance board described the shift as heroic productivity. I'd call it logic finally doing its job. And that's how GPT-5 turns governance from episodic firefighting into perpetual alignment. You're maintaining order at the speed of reasoning. Which brings us neatly to the endgame, why sweating over governance is about to become an artifact of history. Governance without sweat. So that's the arc. Manual audits replaced by inferred logic, reactive compliance replaced by predictive assurance. GPT-5's reasoning transforms Copilot from note-taking assistant into genuine overseer of accountability. It's not merely producing answers, it's constructing understanding. Remember the old governance triad: Fabric tracks lineage, Purview classifies data, PowerBI restricts access. GPT-5 unites them under one audit brain that evaluates context as easily as content. The smartest thing about Fabric isn't Fabric, it's the AI finally keeping it honest. If you've endured sleepless nights cross-checking CSVs, this is your reprieve. Activate reasoning in Copilot Studio, wire those connectors, and let GPT-5 target inconsistencies before they target you. The next evolution of governance isn't paperwork, it's perpetual reasoning. Lock in your upgrade path, subscribe, turn on alerts, and let new episodes deploy automatically. No manual checks, no missed updates, just continuous delivery of clarity. Proceed.